Hello and welcome. It's Kogitoday. Here we highlight the achievements of the administration of Governor Yahaya Bello. This week, our guest is the Commissioner for Education, and our areas of attention include change in infrastructure. How soon will the ongoing projects be concluded? The Honorable Commissioner will also touch the twin issue of girl-child education and child hawkers. Welcome.
The significant change that had happened in terms of infrastructure between then and now. They are currently under SUBEB. The state gives counterpart funding and federal also contributes to the pool. So we have for the basic education, we have for construction of classroom blocks right now across Kogi State, we have 112 classroom blocks that are being blocks of classroom under construction. We have for both computer and laboratory buildings, 20 are going on under SUBEB. As you know, SUBEB covers both primary and junior secondary education. Also, still again, there are 330 number under the 2015-2016 projects. The funding is actually behind. It's not 2018 yet, but for the current ongoing one, they are done under the intervention for 2015-2016. So there's been that gap. 30 boreholes have been constructed across basic education schools in the state, and also we have 30 toilets also going on across the state.
Dotting the entire landscape of Kogi State are projects in the areas of health, agriculture, education, water resources, and many more. Can this government conclude the education projects within 1 year?
Over time in Nigeria, we seem to have the mindset that a lot of magic can be done at the snap of your finger. That is one of the reasons why we have poor quality buildings. One of the reasons why we have a whole shoddy job. But you remember they said if you want to ensure lifetime sustainability, then you would invest in education. Part of this investment is what has His Excellency done towards that. I was just mentioning to you a few while back that quality assurance is one of the heartbeats and the most important components of government responsibility, ensuring that learning actually takes place and that the quality of learning is guaranteed across all institutions of learning and all of that. Part of what His Excellency has done, particularly in his post-media, is to strengthen quality assurance departments. For the first time in the history of the state, I am told, because the director told me, and he's been here for over 25 years, and he's a director. And then what he told me was that this is the first time that the state aspired and actually succeeded in assessing 21 local government areas, more than 60% of the schools in the first week of resumption. It's the first time that government, despite its lean resources, allocates a vehicle solely for the purpose of quality assurance monitoring. It's the first time that you are now trying to look at how is the ministry actually structured. Because if the structure and the organogram, the institutional framework of the ministry is wrong, you cannot achieve anything meaningfully. And those are what I would like to congratulate His Excellency that I have spent attention doing. One, it said, it's been argued before that why most governments would like to spend a lot of time doing construction is because government raise funds that way. But when a government decides to focus on organizational, institutional, and policy reforms, it tells you that you want to do something that outlives you. Again, how would you talk about governance if government institutions are not functional? Accountability, governance, and leadership are interwoven. And the strength of any sustainable development is structuring ministries and departments to such a way that you ensure that there's good governance and corporate governance in place in terms of those ones. So one, His Excellency, as far as is concerned now, we've partnered with the support we have received from Action Aid. We've had training on quality assurance. We've reviewed the monitoring tools for the quality assurance department. We've taken a second look again at the monitoring tool and assessment criteria for establishment of private schools and their functionality. A whole lot of these have just been done, particularly in the past 6 months, looking a close look at what is obtainable and what is realistic. We are also, for instance, paying attention to what is even the database of teachers you have out there. I'm happy we started conversation with the Teaching Registration Council of Nigeria to say, first of all, is to even assess what do they have, who are they? What are their skill sets? Where are they? Where do we have a gap? As you would observe in the 2018 budget, there was no plan for recruitment of teachers. And we also observed that what you have there, even for the training of teachers, in terms of the budgetary provision, was actually very limited. And then with the paucity of funds again at the state level, it's unrealistic. And then the government thought realistically, we could, within the ambit of what is available, focus on what you need technical skill and expertise to restructure and to put in place. And then we can consolidate on that in the incoming year by saying, after you have a fair idea of what your needs assessment report is about, government can now prioritize where its most important funding would go. That is not to say government would not do anything. Like you would recall, His Excellency midterm came in during the second term. So, and we are using the second and the third term to look into what could be done. Strengthening the institutional framework. For instance, positioning the ministry to be able to respond to all the facets of the key performance indicator you have. The ministry created a department we call inclusive and non-formal education, because you now have to pay. Before then, you will find that the way the ministry is structured, the way individual staffs are placed, their skill set was not a factor, and that was affecting performance. So His Excellency has paid strong attention to organizational and institutional framework. We do hope that before the end of this month, that the draft organogram we have, as you could see them, have been structured, and then we have also revised what we could do, and then again realigning and reassessing, redirecting ourselves is a fair key one. If that has been done in the past 26 years, then we wouldn't have to be rebuilding it all over. We've had to, in the past 6 months, I could only speak for the past, what has His Excellency done? He took a bold step in addressing labor unrest. Just a while back, we received a complaint from some of the students in Kogi Polytechnic, and then we met with the top management staff to review what are they doing in terms of the arrangement of semesters, in terms of students who were unable to have received their certificates and who were supposed to have gone on service? There was some agitation by some segments of students. And when we sat down with the Polytechnic management, what we found is that the labor unrest in the past had actually caused the Polytechnic to miss some of the semesters. And then they are trying to catch up with the semester. So they had to do more or less crash program. But then the question you will need to ask is that if you have an academic semester or session that should have lasted for X months, and you are now doing crash program because you want to push in more than 2-3 semesters within 1 year, it affects the quality of learning. So why not we simply said, like I remember when I was in the university, and then in 94, 95, there was no academic session because of a prolonged ASU strike. So we lost 1 academic year. So, and then the question would have been, when you have that scenario, why not lose the academic year and go on with an even-paced one? We are able to have this conversation only because His Excellency, through the prescription of the labor union, has brought in a measure of rest. If not, in 2016, in 2017, academic calendar in Kogi State was strongly distorted. The students were at the receiving end of it all. That is not to say that all the issues have been addressed, but it's just a way of saying that while the issues can be addressed, it shouldn't be a total stoppage. And finding a sane way of resolving this means we could actually still have sanity within the system, address those other issues, and with the support we could give and increased funding, some of this could be addressed.
It is a known fact that in some parts of Nigeria, the girl child is at a disadvantage educationally. Kogi is in north-central Nigeria, from where we have heard some past stories of neglect of the girl child.
One of the key performance indicators for His Excellency in the New Direction Blueprint, and I would like to read it to you itself. Part of what he said is to ensure that there's access to education, even for the girl child, inclusive education for all, and to also ensure that there's 100% of crossovers between Basic 6 to GSS, and then, of course, between GSS to SS. For instance, one of the outcomes is to reduce girl-child dropout rates, and part of the target is to ensure 100% retention and completion rate in schools by all girl child by 2019, to ensure 100% retention and completion for all girl child in senior secondary school by 2019. I can't tell you at this time how much of that has happened before this time we are talking. Like I said, the data were not available. But with the data we are harvesting from the sector, and we would in the next few months analyze at the ministry level, we would be able to give you scientifically how much of this performance have been. But what is very puzzling is the fact that when the federal intervention for some states was conceived, Kogi was not mentioned about one of the states that have the high rates of children out of school. It's shocking. But again, if like I said, the conversation between the states and the federal ministry has been very challenged in the past, no wonder the states, most information about the state government is abbreviated for the state government in absentia of the state government. And those data, in my humble view, need to be revisited by the federal government. Because when you come into Kogi State, what you find on the average is that Kogi State is rural. Kogi State is in the north central. And typical of these settings, most students are out of school. More girl child that married at early age. Take a look. I've had more than my fair share of shock where you find that the dropout rate by children in GSS across communities in Kogi State is very high. But the data collectors have not been fair to Kogi State. And the challenge before all of us as Nigerians, and particularly as people who are in government, is to ensure that the data that is generated and is being used for planning meets the standard of integrity and accuracy. But what we have in Kogi State is Kogi State should be one of the states that receive more than its fair share of support we are having right now. But again, I will leave that challenge to those in data, National Bureau of Statistics, the State Bureau of Statistics, the National Population Commission to do their homework. Because sometimes the data you find out there do not meet the truth of what we are having. But the target of His Excellency is to ensure access to schools. That would mean in the next few years, that His Excellency would have to build more schools, establish schools where there are none. Particularly, the goal of primary education is to establish new schools in places such that primary education, like I said, my community in Ileke, Monoja, do not have a single school. And that you are having about 4, 5, 6, 7, a population that is very significant and no school. There are other places beside that place. It shows that in the past, the planning, educational planning by government has been faulty. His Excellency planned to correct that, and that would have to do, like I said, having real data, having information on time, real time, and we should be able to say in Kogi State, this is the map of Kogi State, and this is where I can find each of those schools. This is where all the settlements are. That's part of what will take us more than 1 or 2 months to establish, but we do hope that before the end of this year, we should put in place all those data, and that would help His Excellency, like he promised before 2019. Deliver on some of these ones. But if you keep pouring water into a bucket and you don't know, you can't see what the level of that bucket is, you may also be blind in terms of intervention you can offer. The importance of data in the education sector cannot be overemphasized. Possibly that is why we are, again, focusing on that as a major criteria that have to be in place, so that when we start building all the other ones, you would know that those things are there. For instance, how would you know the teaching aids? Before, government does something very blindly in the past. Okay, just buy 1,000 books, throw it to schools. What's the total population of students? We don't know. But now, when I have the number of schools, the number of students, it will surprise you what we found in the annual school census. In the annual school census 2018, there are teachers that have no school, but are paid for by government. There are schools that do not exist, but are in government database of schools that they are. There are schools that do not have more than 1 classroom or functional schools. Possibly some of those communities are screaming more than others. So give us a month or two. When all this data and school student population is put online and all schools are mandated, we found schools, interestingly, that have computer laboratories and they are under lock and key and they were never opened. They were installed sometime in the past. But because before now, at the ministry level, there was a lot of blindness, you couldn't tell. But until we harvest and we clean the stables and then you're sure everywhere is clean, we'll be able to do proper education planning.
Education is the greatest weapon to poverty. Education is the greatest legacy a parent can bequeath a child. These are some popular sayings. It is therefore an eyesore when you see children hawking various items during school hours. How is Kogi government mobilizing children on the street back to school?
First, I would want to say that improved engagement with stakeholders is one of the key wins. There's no one individual that can do anything. If I tell you the ministry would act as a silo and achieve all of those goals, then we're already set to fail. In fact, I want to agree with the World Bank in the World Development Report 2018 that what is required in the education sector going forward is for ensuring alignment and cohesion of stakeholders. Part of the critical role we would have in the Ministry of Education is to align all our stakeholders together, to help everybody see that education is everybody's problem, everybody's benefit, everybody's interest. In fact, education is the bedrock of all sustainable development. There's no other developmental goal you can achieve, none, if you do not have education. You cannot have improved economy in Nigeria if you do not invest in education. The whole world of the lies know. In fact, there were some statistics we were reading together when we were partnering. Interestingly, we are partnering with the National Library. We had a joint event just last week, and then we are also partnering with them to revamp the library that you're having over there. Again, because one is if you have functional libraries across the street and then people have access to functional public libraries, it will reduce most of those challenges we are seeing. In fact, it will reduce most of the gaps we are having in terms of learning aids and learning tools if we have public libraries that can be accessed across the state. But having said that, again, is when you bring in everybody, communities have their role. The part that is sad to note is sometimes you find that nobody cares. It's been a whole lot of behavioral change that have to change. The communities are very important stakeholders. Parents themselves are very important stakeholders. What makes you a responsible parent? The question we need to ask ourselves, I want to thank the gentlemen of the media for helping have some of that, because until we take responsibility and ownership for the outcomes we want to have in a society, we cannot keep blaming everybody for the smear that is on our faces. Government sometimes and oftentimes construct schools, and even in most of the communities I can list for you, I can give you names and figures. Community members go into public schools within the community and vandalize the structure. And sometimes other members of the community are aware and nobody says anything. And if governments keep investing in those infrastructures and communities are not responsive enough to take ownership of them, where are you? We are nowhere. We might as well not get started. That has been one of the dilemma, that there's the height and the rate at which government facilities are vandalized shows that we need to have collective ownership and responsibility for those ones. That is beyond what the ministry alone can do. We would have to partner with others. Sometimes, again, we looked wrongly at technical and vocational education as though it is demeaning, which is why I'm excited that under TVET, that the federal government is giving blue-collar job its pride of place. In fact, if you look at the structure, by the time you are even leaving your junior secondary school and your senior secondary school, you should have skills. We have, over time, that is not a Kogi State problem alone. Somewhere in Nigeria, we all forgot, and we no longer ask people, what are the results and the outcomes? We begin to ask in terms of, okay, government have done well because you have spent X billion of naira, you know, but not in terms of what results, what attitudinal change, what impact have been on ground within this period of time. So if we are going to have girl child stay in there, community members, parents, must begin to see the need that whether I go through, of course, your child should go through basic education. We should encourage that everybody learn to read and write. Everybody, every child should be encouraged. I've been to a community, and then I found 3 children. Interestingly, it was one of our access and monitoring, and then I found in a particular community, I engage children when I find them, and I find 3 young girls, all 13-year-old in primary 5. I had to call, where is your mother? Parent not around, they dump them on the grandmother. I want to see your grandmother. Take me to your grandmother. Grandmother, what are you doing with 13-year-old girl child? And then they are in primary 5. When they should be part of the population writing junior WAEC at this time if all goes well. And you're like, oh, she's boarding, parents do not have money, oh, we're trying to find the good schools. So for some length of time, children were not in school. Kogi State is majorly a rural state. So there's need for all stakeholders to do more, to conscientize that we shouldn't just focus on my child, your child, because we know our parents somewhere have given us the privilege of education. It must become a societal norm. It means that the media and all stakeholders should make it our problem that when there's an African adage that says, when you give birth to a child is raised by a community. If half the population of girl child in the state and elsewhere are not there, then we should be collectively as a community responsible for that. And then we should find a way of catch a child. Like we said, sponsor a child, adopt a school. We make sure they all go through basic education. After basic education, we want them to acquire skills. The process of skill acquisition starts even through basic education. And then we find their interest, and if somebody needs to even have a break because you want to major in there, we encourage them to go to government technical colleges. And then if you don't go to government technical colleges, we could find formal and informal vocational and skill centers. Either way, we shouldn't make it look like if you are not going through formal education, you are an illiterate. No. Through TVET, we can capture all of them, and that is what we are repositioning Kogi State Ministry of Education, Science and Technology to do.
The program is Kogi Today, and we cannot close without hearing from some dependable allies of this government in the area of education.
The State Ministry of Education is partnering with NAPTEP so we can rebuild and have a good roadmap for technical and vocational education in Kogi State. We had my chief executive in Kogi State working on some modalities on how Kogi State can key in to technical and vocational education, knowing fully well that technical and vocational education is the roadmap to industrial development of any nation and state in particular. We're working out modalities on how we can have vocational and training skill centers for the girl child in Kogi State, so that our girls who are around the street, either drop out from school, could find a means of living outside accessing the formal education by acquiring a skill. But you know that when you have a workable skill, you have a means of livelihood. And the State Ministry of Education has been carrying NAPTEP along in this aspect very, very well. And we're working together to achieve this.
Ministry of Education have been working in collaboration with the National Teachers Institute to train teachers. That is both at grade 2 level, which is PTTP, the NC level, the postgraduate diploma in education level, and the BSc and BEd level. So the serving teachers that the Ministry of Education and SUBEB are upgrading were the one that always train them. That is through distance learning operation, whereby they attend lectures during the weekends, they write exams, and at the end of the day, we give them certificates which will improve their teaching method. Apart from that, we have what we call the SDG training, whereby we train teachers in Kogi State. That is to improve their method and techniques of teaching, which is our major mandate.